Welcome to Kleppers Corner, This Week in History, the only show where we travel through time without getting canceled by Julius Caesar or the Twitter mob. Every week, history tries to teach us a lesson, and every week we ignore it like a terms of service agreement. But not today. Today, we're diving into the most bizarre, explosive, duck-filled events that happened between June 8th and June 15th throughout history. So buckle up, because this ride comes with ghost traps, flaming monks, and a guy who thought kites and lightning were a good combo. Segment 1. Franklin flew a kite and somehow didn't die. Let's start with the OG of American science bros, Benjamin Franklin. On June 10th, 1752, Franklin reportedly flew a kite into a thunderstorm, holding onto a key tied to a wet string, because that's what you do when your hobbies include both science and dying dramatically. Imagine doing this today. You'd be on a YouTube short titled "Florida Man Challenges Zeus." Franklin wanted to prove that lightning was electricity, and he did. Or maybe he didn't, because modern historians think the lightning never struck the kite, which means this was less a groundbreaking experiment and more a glorified science-themed TikTok prank. The real miracle isn't the discovery, it's that he survived. Because if you try this today, you end up trending on r/well, that sucks. Segment 2, the burning of the HMS Gaspee, Rhode Island's less sexy tea party. June 9, 1772. A group of Rhode Island colonists, upset over British customs enforcement, set a British ship on fire. And not just any ship, but the HMS Gaspee, a Royal Customs schooner. Because nothing says we're sick of your tyranny like a good old-fashioned nautical bonfire. And the best part? Nobody was punished. The British tried to investigate, but everyone in Rhode Island suddenly had the collective memory of a goldfish. This wasn't just a protest, it was colonial-level gaslighting. Ship? What ship? Never heard of it. Want some clam chowder? It's like the Boston Tea Party's awkward cousin who didn't get the Netflix documentary deal, but still lit something on fire for freedom. Segment 3. Donald Duck debuts and immediately has a breakdown. On June 9th, 1934, Disney released The Wise Little Hen, and with it, gave us a national treasure, Donald Duck. A duck in a sailor suit with a voice that sounds like he gargled gravel in spite. America fell in love instantly. In his first cartoon, Donald tries to get out of helping with chores, which means he was relatable from day one. And when he doesn't get away with it, he explodes in rage. He's basically the spirit animal of every middle manager on Zoom. And over the years, he evolved from lazy farmhand to furious global icon. He even got drafted into World War II propaganda films. Imagine pitching that. Okay, it's World War II, and our secret weapon is a very angry duck in no pants. Segment 4. Ghostbusters, Marshmallow Men, and 80s Brilliance. June 8th, 1984. The movie Ghostbusters premiered and haunted our hearts forever. A group of out-of-work scientists with the fashion sense of janitors decided to fight ghosts. And the world said, yes, this is peak cinema. It had everything: slime, sarcasm, New York attitude, and a giant marshmallow Godzilla. Honestly, what more do you need? And that theme song, the moment you hear "Who You Gonna Call," your brain fills in the rest like muscle memory. It's Pavlovian nostalgia. The plot makes no sense, the tech is just nonsense with flashing lights, and yet it works because the characters are so lovable. And also because in the 80s, cocaine probably greenlit every third movie idea. Segment 5. George Orwell invents the surveillance state and gives it a cool logo. June 8th, 1949. George Orwell released 1984, and we've been nervously side-eyeing Alexa ever since. In a time when everyone was worried about Soviet spies and post-war hangovers, Orwell went ahead and wrote the instruction manual for dystopia. He gave us Big Brother, Doublethink, Newspeak, and a future where being correct is illegal. And somehow, he managed to make it all sound like a mildly boring desk job at Hell Inc. The book wasn't just ahead of its time, it was practically clairvoyant. Today we read it in high school English, nod solemnly, and then post TikToks about it while surrounded by 6 microphones and 4 cameras. If Orwell were alive now, he'd be tweeting, "Told ya." Segment 6, Loving Day, because love shouldn't be a crime. June 12, 1967. The Supreme Court ruled in Loving v. Virginia that bans on interracial marriage were unconstitutional. The case was emphatic, literally called Loving, because even the universe knew this needed poetic branding. The Lovings, Mildred and Richard, were sentenced to a year in prison for being married, because apparently in the 1960s, marrying the wrong person was a felony, but lead paint was just fine. Their case became a turning point in civil rights, and it paved the way for future marriage equality battles. Today, June 12th, is celebrated as Loving Day, a reminder that triumphant love wins, and that the Supreme Court occasionally gets it right in between rage-inducing decisions. Also, Mildred Loving didn't become an influencer, she just wanted to live her life, which somehow makes her even cooler. Segment 7. The General Slocum Disaster, aka New York's Forgotten Titanic. June 15, 1904. Over 1,000 people, mostly German-American women and children, died when the excursion steamer General Slocum caught fire. Life vests were rotted. Lifeboats were painted shut. It was a floating tragedy wrapped in bureaucratic failure. It was the worst disaster in New York until 9/11, and yet most people today have never heard of it. Probably because it didn't come with a Celine Dion soundtrack or a Leo DiCaprio. The city responded with new safety laws, which is great, but maybe next time we skip the whole birding ferry of death part. Just a thought. Segment 8. Iceland explodes and Europe coughs to death. June 8, 1783, Iceland's Loki volcano erupted, spewing toxic gas for 8 straight months. It killed livestock, ruined crops, and poisoned the skies. In Europe, it caused famine, bizarre weather, and possibly contributed to the French Revolution. Because nothing says off with their heads like bad harvests and sulfur rain. People were dying, crops were failing, and the air smelled like Satan's humidifier. Benjamin Franklin even noticed it in France and said, "Yep, that's not right." The Loki eruption is your annual reminder that nature doesn't need to swipe right to ruin your week. Sometimes it just opens up the earth and sends you a death cloud with no return address. Segment 9. A monk sets himself on fire to protest injustice. June 11th, 1963. Buddhist monk Thich Quang Duc self-immolated in Saigon to protest the Vietnamese government's persecution of Buddhists. He sat cross-legged, lit a match, and didn't move. Because sometimes the only way to make people look is to burn yourself alive. Journalist Malcolm Brown captured the moment, and the world collectively gasped. JFK saw the photo and said it shook him more than any battlefield image, because it was serene, haunting, and inescapably human. It sparked global outrage and led to the eventual fall of the dim regime. It also forced people to realize that maybe, just maybe, bombing villages and ignoring monks wasn't great policy. Segment 10, the ghost of government lies, the Pentagon Papers. June 13, 1971, the New York Times published the Pentagon Papers, a leaked internal report showing the U.S. government had been lying about Vietnam for decades. Shocking, I know. Next you'll tell me water is wet. Whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg gave the papers to the press because he had this weird notion that Americans should know what their government is actually doing. Radical, right? Nixon tried to block the story, but the Supreme Court said no. Freedom of the press, baby. The whole saga basically launched investigative journalism into the stratosphere and helped kill public support for the war. All thanks to one guy with a Xerox machine and a conscience. And that wraps up this week in history. From flaming monks to flammable boats to volcanic rage and vengeful ducks, it turns out the past was just as weird and explosive as the present, only with worse plumbing and slightly more powdered wigs. So remember, folks, if history has taught us anything, it's that no matter the century, there's always someone doing something brave, brilliant, or just plain bonkers. And lucky for us, it usually happens in June. Hit that like button, tell your friends, and leave a comment telling me what your favorite flaming historical moment was. I'll see you next week, assuming Ben Franklin doesn't invent time travel and sue me for defamation.